Wait until the very end. Trust me on this. What I'm about to tell you will change how you see family forever. My name is Victoria Blackwood, and I'm 31 years old. For the past 15 years, I've been dead to my family, officially erased, disinherited, cast out like garbage over something so small, so trivial, that even now it seems impossible. But here's what they didn't know, what they couldn't have known, is that their little mistake would cost them everything. Everything. And I mean that literally. Because sometimes the person you throw away becomes the very person who holds your entire world in their hands. Sometimes the daughter you abandon becomes your judge, jury, and executioner. Stay with me, because this story has layers you won't see coming, secrets that connect in ways that will make your skin crawl, and an ending that will leave you questioning everything you think you know about justice, revenge, and blood. I was never supposed to be the heir. That honor belonged to my older brother Marcus, the golden boy who could do no wrong in my father's steel gray eyes. I was just Victoria, the spare, the afterthought, the daughter who happened to be born into the Blackwood fortune but was never truly meant to inherit it. The Blackwood name carried weight in our city, real weight. My great-grandfather had built Blackwood Industries from nothing, turning it into a manufacturing empire that employed thousands. By the time I was born, we owned half the industrial district, and our family's influence reached into every corner of local politics and business. The Blackwood Mansion sat on Hillcrest Drive like a monument to our success. 8 bedrooms, marble floors, a swimming pool that cost more than most people's houses. Growing up, I lived in Marcus's shadow. He was 3 years older, 6 feet tall, with our father's commanding presence and mother's striking blue eyes. While I spent my afternoons in the library reading financial reports and business journals, Marcus was out playing golf with father's associates or attending charity galas where he'd charm everyone with his easy smile and perfect manners. Victoria's the smart one, mother would say with a dismissive wave of her manicured hand, but Marcus has the personality for business. Smart. That's what they called me when they didn't want to say I was the disappointment. The one who asked too many questions, the one who noticed when the numbers didn't add up, the one who actually cared about the business that bore our name. I graduated summa cum laude from Harvard Business School at 22. Marcus barely scraped through his MBA at a state school, but somehow he was still the one being groomed to take over. When I suggested new efficiency measures that could save the company millions, father would nod politely and then ask Marcus what he thought about golf course investments. The injustice of it burned, but I told myself it was temporary. Surely, when father saw my capabilities, when he realized I understood the business better than anyone else in the family, things would change. I was naive, I was young, I was wrong. The first crack in my perfect world appeared when I was 25. I'd been working in the company for 3 years, officially as a junior analyst, but unofficially as the person who actually understood what was happening with our finances. Late one evening, I was reviewing quarterly reports when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Money was missing. Not small amounts. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars that had been systematically siphoned from various accounts over the past 2 years. The transfers were sophisticated, hidden in legitimate-looking transactions, but the pattern was clear once you knew what to look for. I spent the next week quietly investigating, tracing the money through shell companies and offshore accounts. What I found made me sick to my stomach. The thief wasn't some outside criminal. It was Marcus. My golden boy brother had been stealing from our family's company to fund his gambling addiction. Sports betting, poker games, expensive trips to Las Vegas. He'd been living a secret life funded by stolen money. Over $2 million had disappeared into his personal playground. I stared at the evidence spread across my desk in my small office, my hands trembling. This wasn't just theft. This was betrayal of the deepest kind. Our family's legacy, our employees' livelihoods, our reputation, all of it was at risk because Marcus couldn't control himself. The right thing to do was obvious. I had to tell father. I gathered all the evidence, made copies, and prepared my presentation. I practiced what I would say, how I would explain the situation without destroying Marcus completely. Because despite everything, he was still my brother. The family meeting was scheduled for the next morning. Father, Mother, Marcus, and me sitting around the polished mahogany table in Father's study. The same table where every major family decision had been made for 3 generations. "Victoria has something important to discuss," Father said, his voice carrying that tone that meant business. "Something about the company finances." I looked at Marcus. He was sitting across from me, looking relaxed and confident, completely unaware that his world was about to implode. For a moment, I hesitated. This would ruin him. This would destroy everything he'd worked for. But then I thought about our employees, about the families who depended on Blackwood Industries for their livelihoods, about the legacy our great-grandfather had built with his bare hands, about what was right. "I've discovered some irregularities in our accounts," I began, my voice steady despite the storm in my chest. "Over the past 2 years, approximately $2.1 million has been systematically stolen from the company through a series of complex transactions." The room went silent. Father's face turned to stone. Mother gasped, her hand flying to her throat. Marcus's confident expression cracked, and I saw the flash of panic in his eyes. "That's impossible," Father said flatly. "Our security measures were circumvented by someone with intimate knowledge of our systems," I continued. "Someone with access to executive accounts and authorization codes." I slid the folder across the table to Father. "Someone inside the family." Father opened the folder, his face growing darker with each page. The bank statements, the traced transactions, the evidence of Marcus's gambling accounts. It was all there, laid out in undeniable detail. "Marcus," Father said, his voice deadly quiet, "explain this." I watched my brother's face cycle through emotions: panic, anger, desperation, and finally something that looked like relief. The relief of someone who'd been carrying a terrible secret for too long. "I can explain," Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. "It's not what it looks like." "It looks like you stole over $2 million from our family," Father replied. The confrontation that followed was brutal. Marcus broke down, admitting to everything: the gambling, the debt, the theft. He sobbed like a child, begging for forgiveness, promising to pay it all back somehow. Mother cried. Father raged. The golden boy had fallen, and the sound of his impact was deafening. But then something happened that I never saw coming, something that would change my life forever. Father looked at me across that mahogany table, his gray eyes blazing with fury, and said, "How long have you known about this?" "I discovered it a week ago," I answered honestly. "I spent the time gathering evidence to make sure I was right before bringing it to you." "A week?" Father's voice was ice. "You knew your brother was stealing from us, and you waited a week to tell us. I needed to be certain. I needed proof. I couldn't make accusations without. You should have come to me immediately." Father slammed his hand on the table. "The moment you suspected something, you should have brought it to me. Instead, you conducted your own investigation like some kind of detective. Do you have any idea how much more damage could have been done in that week?" I stared at him, confused. I was trying to be thorough. I was trying to protect the family. "You were trying to make yourself look like the hero," Mother said, her voice cold. "You were trying to make Marcus look bad so you could take his place." The accusation hit me like a physical blow. "That's not true. I was trying to save the company." "Were you?" Father leaned forward. "Or were you trying to eliminate your competition? Marcus made a mistake, yes, but you betrayed your own brother. You gathered evidence against him like a prosecutor building a case." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He stole from us. He stole from our family, from our employees, And you used that to try to destroy him? Father interrupted. "What kind of person does that make you, Victoria? What kind of daughter turns her own brother into the authorities?" "I didn't turn him into any authorities," I protested. "I brought it to you, to the family, to handle internally. After you'd already built your case against him, after you'd already decided he was guilty." Father's voice was filled with disgust. "Family protects family, Victoria. Family doesn't tear each other down." I looked around the table at the faces I'd known my entire life. Marcus, still crying but now looking at me with pure hatred. Mother, shaking her head in disappointment. Father, regarding me like I was something distasteful he'd found on his shoe. "I can't trust you," Father said finally. "If you'll do this to your own brother, what will you do to me?" to the company, to anyone who stands in your way. I would never. You already have. Father stood up, his decision made. Marcus will enter rehabilitation. He'll pay back every penny, and he'll prove he's learned from his mistakes. But you've shown your true colors. You've shown that you value being right more than family loyalty. The room was spinning. This couldn't be happening. I was protecting the family. I was protecting the business. You were protecting yourself, Mother said quietly. You saw an opportunity to bring down Marcus, and you took it. That's not true. My voice was breaking. I love this family. I love this company. Everything I've done has been for us. Father walked to his desk and pulled out a thick folder. I've been thinking about succession planning, he said, about who should inherit Blackwood Industries when I'm gone. This situation has made my decision very clear. He opened the folder and pulled out a legal document. Marcus will inherit the company and all family assets. You, Victoria, will receive nothing. The words hit me like bullets. Nothing? Nothing. You're being removed from the company, effective immediately. Your trust fund is being dissolved. Your ownership stake is being transferred to Marcus. Consider this your inheritance. The knowledge that your betrayal has cost you everything. I sat there, numb, as Father explained the legal process. How my name would be removed from all company documents, how my access to family accounts would be revoked, how I would be given 30 days to vacate the family estate. You can't do this, I whispered. I can, and I am. Father's voice was final. You made your choice when you decided to destroy your brother. Instead of protecting him, now live with the consequences. Marcus looked up at me, tears still streaming down his face. But now there was something else there. Triumph. The golden boy had fallen, but he was taking me down with him. I'm sorry it had to be this way, Victoria, Mother said, but her voice held no warmth. You could have been a wonderful addition to the family business. Instead, you chose to be a liability. I stood up on shaking legs. I need time to think about this, to process. There's nothing to process, Father interrupted. The decision is made. Marcus will start rehabilitation tomorrow. You'll start looking for a new place to live. I walked out of that study in a daze. The hallway seemed longer than usual. The portraits of our ancestors looking down at me with what felt like disappointment. I made it to my room before the tears came. I packed that night. Not everything. I couldn't face sorting through 25 years of memories. Just the essentials. Clothes, documents, the few personal items that truly mattered to me. I left behind the jewelry, the designer handbags, the expensive art that had decorated my walls. None of it felt like mine anymore. The next morning, I loaded my car with my belongings and drove away from Hillcrest Drive. I didn't look back. I couldn't. If I had, I might have seen Mother watching from her bedroom window, or Father in his study, or Marcus in the driveway, making sure I was really gone. But I didn't look back. I drove toward the city, toward uncertainty, toward a future I couldn't even imagine. In my rearview mirror, the Blackwood mansion grew smaller and smaller until it disappeared entirely. I was 25 years old, and I was alone for the first time in my life. No family, no fortune, no future that I could envision. Just the clothes on my back, the knowledge in my head, and a burning sense of injustice that would fuel everything that came next. As I drove through the city streets, one thought kept repeating in my mind. They would regret this. They would all regret this. I didn't know how or when, but someday, somehow, they would understand the magnitude of their mistake. I was Victoria Blackwood, and I was going to show them exactly what they'd thrown away. The cheap motel rooms smelled like disinfectant and broken dreams. I sat on the scratchy bedspread, staring at my laptop screen, trying to figure out how to rebuild a life from nothing. My savings account had exactly $3,847 in it. Money I'd earned from part-time jobs during college, carefully saved and separate from the family fortune I just lost access to. $3,000. That's what 15 years of privilege had amounted to in the real world. I spent the first week applying for jobs. My Harvard MBA should have opened doors, but every position required references, and I couldn't exactly list my father as a contact. The Blackwood name, which had once been my greatest asset, was now my biggest liability. In our city, everyone knew everyone, and word traveled fast about the family disgrace who'd been disowned. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Sarah Chen, my former professor from Harvard, called me after hearing about my situation through the alumni network. Victoria, her voice was warm but concerned. I heard about what happened. I want you to know that what you did was the right thing. Ethics matter more than family politics. I almost cried at hearing anyone, say that I'd made the right choice. I have a proposition for you, Dr. Chen continued. I've been consulting for a small investment firm in Chicago. They're looking for someone with your analytical skills and moral backbone. The salary isn't much, but it's honest work with people who value integrity. Chicago. 1,000 miles from home, from family, from everything I'd ever known. It was perfect. Hartwell & Associates was a small firm specializing in ethical investments. They managed portfolios for clients who cared about where their money went: renewable energy, fair trade, sustainable agriculture. It was the opposite of the old money traditional investments that Blackwood Industries favored. My boss, David Hartwell, was a soft-spoken man in his 50s who'd started the firm after leaving Wall Street because he was tired of making rich people richer while ignoring the environmental and social costs. He hired me as a junior analyst for $45,000 a year, a fraction of what I'd been making at Blackwood Industries, but it was honest money. I rented a studio apartment in a converted warehouse, furnished it with pieces from thrift stores and garage sales, and threw myself into work with an intensity that bordered on obsession. I had something to prove, to myself, to my family, to the world. The first year was brutal. I worked 12-hour days, learning everything I could about sustainable investing, green technology, and social impact funds. I analyzed companies not just for their profit potential, but for their environmental footprint, their labor practices, their commitment to positive change. But here's what I discovered. Doing good and making money weren't mutually exclusive. In fact, companies with strong ethical foundations often outperformed their traditional competitors. They had better employee retention, stronger customer loyalty, and more innovative approaches to solving problems. I started identifying patterns that others missed. A small solar panel manufacturer in Arizona that was about to land a major government contract. A water purification company in Oregon that had developed breakthrough technology. A fair trade coffee cooperative in Guatemala that was poised for massive growth. My investment recommendations consistently outperformed the market. Client portfolios grew by 15%, then 20%, then 25% annually. Word spread through the sustainable investing community about the young analyst in Chicago who had an uncanny ability to spot winners. David noticed, "Victoria, you're not just good at this, you're exceptional. I've been in this business for 20 years, and I've never seen anyone with your instincts for finding diamonds in the rough." By my second year, I'd been promoted to senior analyst. By my third year, I was managing my own client portfolios. But I wanted more. I could see opportunities that the firm wasn't equipped to pursue: larger investments, more complex deals, international markets. "I want to start my own division," I told David during my annual review. Sustainable Ventures Capital. We identify promising companies and provide both funding and strategic guidance. David looked skeptical. "That's a big leap from portfolio management. Venture capital requires significant resources, extensive networks, and a tolerance for risk that most of our clients don't have." "I can build the networks," I said. "And I can prove the concept with smaller investments first. Give me 6 months to show you what I can do." He agreed, probably thinking I'd fail and learn a valuable lesson about overreaching. Instead, I spent those 6 months building something that would change everything. I identified 5 small companies with revolutionary potential: a vertical farming startup in Detroit that could grow vegetables in abandoned warehouses, a battery recycling company in California that could recover rare earth metals from old electronics, a biodegradable packaging company in Portland that could replace plastic with plant-based materials. But instead of just investing in them, I became their strategic partner. I helped them refine their business models, connected them with potential customers, and guided them through the complex process of scaling up. I wasn't just betting on their success, I was ensuring it. The results were spectacular. The vertical farming company landed contracts with 3 major grocery chains. The battery recycling company was acquired by Tesla for $50 million. The packaging company secured deals with Amazon and Walmart. My initial investments of $100,000 each turned into returns of $500,000, $800,000, and $2 million respectively. David was speechless when I showed him the numbers. "How did you do this?" he asked. "I didn't just invest in companies," I explained. "I invested in relationships. I became a partner, not just a funding source. I helped them succeed because their success was my success." That's when I realized something important. I wasn't just good at identifying promising investments. I was good at making them successful. I had a talent for seeing not just what companies were, but what they could become with the right guidance and support. David offered me a partnership in the firm, but I had bigger plans. I'd learned everything I could from Hartwell and Associates, but I was ready to build something of my own. I left Chicago with a Rolodex of contacts, a track record of success, and a reputation for integrity that opened doors across the country. I moved to San Francisco, the heart of the tech world, and started Victoria Capital Management. The name was intentional. I wanted everyone to know exactly who was building this empire. My first office was a cramped space above a coffee shop in the Mission District. I had one employee, myself, and a phone that rang constantly with calls from entrepreneurs who'd heard about my success in Chicago. I was 29 years old, and I was finally building something that was entirely mine. The breakthrough came when I met Elena Rodriguez, a brilliant engineer who developed a new type of solar panel that was 40% more efficient than anything on the market. She'd been turned down by every major investment firm in Silicon Valley because they didn't understand the technology. I understood it. More than that, I understood its potential. I invested $2 million of my own money, everything I'd earned from my Chicago successes, in Elena's company, Sunrise Technologies. But I also invested something more valuable: my time, my network, and my strategic vision. I helped Elena navigate the complex world of government subsidies and tax incentives. I connected her with manufacturing partners who could produce the panels at scale. I introduced her to potential customers in the utility industry who were hungry for more efficient renewable energy solutions. Within 18 months, Sunrise Technologies had grown from a 2-person startup to a company with 200 employees and contracts worth $100 million. When we took the company public, my initial $2 million investment was worth $40 million. But Sunrise was just the beginning. I used that success to attract larger investments, bigger deals, and more ambitious projects. I specialized in companies that were trying to solve real problems: climate change, food security, medical access, education inequality. My portfolio grew to include a medical device company that had developed a portable ultrasound machine for rural areas, an education technology startup that was bringing high-quality online learning to underserved communities, and an agricultural biotechnology company that was developing drought-resistant crops. Each success built on the last. Each company I helped became a referral source for the next. Each investment return became seed money for bigger and bolder ventures. By the time I was 31, Victoria Capital Management had offices in San Francisco, New York, and London. We managed over $500 million in investments, and our portfolio companies employed thousands of people around the world. But more importantly, we were making a difference. Our companies were solving real problems, creating jobs, and building a better world. Every success was proof that you could do well by doing good. I was featured on magazine covers, invited to speak at conferences, and recognized as one of the most influential young investors in the world. The girl who'd been cast out of her family for being too ethical had built an empire on ethics. And through it all, I never forgot where I came from. Every success was a step closer to something I'd been planning since the day I drove away from Hillcrest Drive. Every investment was building toward a moment when I could return home and show my family exactly what they'd thrown away. The opportunity came when I was doing research for a new investment. I was looking into manufacturing companies in the Midwest when I stumbled across a familiar name: Blackwood Industries. My family's company was struggling. The manufacturing industry had changed dramatically in the years since I'd left, and companies that couldn't adapt were being left behind. Blackwood Industries was one of them. I dug deeper, using my network of contacts to gather information. What I found was worse than I'd expected. Marcus had eventually taken over as CEO, just as father had planned. But he'd inherited more than just a company, he'd inherited all of its problems. The manufacturing sector was being disrupted by automation, foreign competition, and changing consumer demands. Companies that had thrived for decades were suddenly obsolete. Blackwood Industries was hemorrhaging money, losing contracts, and laying off employees. Marcus, for all his charm and golf course connections, had no idea how to navigate this new world. He tried to solve the problems the old way, cutting costs, laying off workers, selling off assets. But those solutions weren't working anymore. The company that had once been worth $100 million was now worth maybe $20 million, and that was being generous. The Blackwood family fortune was evaporating, and there was nothing Marcus could do to stop it. I sat in my San Francisco office, looking at the financial reports of my family's failing company, and felt something I hadn't expected: sadness. Not for Marcus or my parents, but for the employees who were losing their jobs, for the legacy that was being destroyed, for the waste of it all. But then I remembered something Father had said during that terrible meeting in his study. Consider this your inheritance, the knowledge that your betrayal has cost you everything. He'd been wrong. My inheritance wasn't the knowledge of what I'd lost. It was the knowledge of what I could build. And what I'd built was powerful enough to save the company he'd kicked me out of, or destroy it completely. The choice was mine. The phone call came on a Tuesday morning in March. I was in my corner office on the 32nd floor of the Salesforce Tower, reviewing quarterly reports from my portfolio companies, when my assistant buzzed me. "Miss Blackwood, there's a call for you. A Mr. Richard Harrison from Harrison Wells and Associates. He says it's urgent." I knew the name. Harrison Wells and Associates was one of the most prestigious law firms in my hometown. They'd handled the Blackwood family's legal affairs for 3 generations. Put him through. Richard Harrison's voice was carefully neutral, professionally distant. "Miss Blackwood, I'm calling regarding Blackwood Industries. I represent the company's interests, and we find ourselves in a rather delicate situation." I leaned back in my chair, looking out at the San Francisco Bay. "What kind of situation, Mr. Harrison?" "The company is facing some financial difficulties. We're exploring various options for restructuring, and your name has come up as a potential investor who might be interested in the manufacturing sector." I almost laughed. They had no idea who they were talking to. "I see. And what makes you think I'd be interested in a struggling manufacturing company?" "Your reputation precedes you, Miss Blackwood. Victoria Capital Management has a track record of turning around companies in distressed industries. We thought you might see potential in Blackwood Industries. Tell me about the company's current situation." For the next 20 minutes, Harrison laid out the grim details. Blackwood Industries was $15 million in debt. They'd lost their 3 largest contracts in the past year. Employee morale was at an all-time low. The company had maybe 6 months of operating capital left. "What about the current management?" I asked. "Marcus Blackwood serves as CEO. He's committed to the company's success, but he's acknowledged that the situation requires expertise beyond his current capabilities." "And the Blackwood family's position?" "They're prepared to consider selling a controlling interest to the right investor, someone who can provide both capital and strategic leadership." I was quiet for a long moment, letting the implications sink in. My family's company, the business that had been built by my great-grandfather, the empire that had been my birthright, was dying. And they were so desperate to save it that they were calling strangers for help. Strangers who happened to be the daughter they'd disowned. "I'll need to see the complete financial records," I said finally. "Every document, every contract, every debt obligation. If I'm going to consider this investment, I need full transparency." "Of course. We can arrange for a due diligence process." "No." My voice was sharp. "I want to see everything myself. I'll be in town next week to review the company personally." Harrison paused. "Miss Blackwood, I should mention that this would involve working directly with the current management team. The Blackwood family has requested to meet with any potential investors." "I understand. Schedule the meeting." After I hung up, I sat in my office for a long time, staring out at the city I'd built my empire in. 6 years. It had been 6 years since I'd driven away from Hillcrest Drive with nothing but a few $1,000s and a burning sense of injustice. Now I was worth $100 million. I controlled investments worth $500 million. I had the power to save or destroy the company that had cast me out. The irony was perfect. I flew back to my hometown on a Thursday evening, taking a commercial flight instead of the private jet I could have afforded. I wanted to stay under the radar, to maintain the element of surprise for as long as possible. The city looked smaller than I remembered. The downtown area that had seemed so impressive in my childhood now looked dated, almost quaint. The industrial district where Blackwood Industries was located showed signs of decay. Empty lots where thriving businesses used to be, boarded up windows, weeds growing through cracked asphalt. I checked into a hotel downtown, not the luxury resort on Hillcrest Drive where I could have stayed, but a modest business hotel where I could work undisturbed. I spread the Blackwood Industries financial documents across my bed and spent most of the night analyzing them. The situation was worse than Harrison had described. The company wasn't just struggling, it was in free fall. Revenue had dropped 60% in the past 3 years. They'd burned through their cash reserves and maxed out their lines of credit. Several key employees had left for competitors, taking valuable contracts with them. But underneath the financial disaster, I could see the bones of a company that could be saved. The manufacturing facilities, while dated, were still functional. The workforce, despite the layoffs, still included experienced craftsmen and engineers. Most importantly, the Blackwood name still carried weight in certain circles. The company could be turned around. It would require significant investment, strategic restructuring, and new leadership. But it could be done. The question was whether I wanted to save it or let it die. The meeting was scheduled for Friday morning at 10 o'clock. I arrived at the Blackwood Industries headquarters 15 minutes early, driving a rented sedan instead of the luxury car I could have afforded. The building looked exactly as I remembered it. Red brick, large windows, the Blackwood Industries sign still prominently displayed above the main entrance. The receptionist, a middle-aged woman I didn't recognize, looked up as I entered. "You must be Miss Blackwood from Victoria Capital Management. Mr. Harrison is expecting you." I nodded, not trusting my voice. Being back in this building, walking through these hallways, brought back a flood of memories. The summers I'd spent here as a teenager, learning about the business from the ground up. The excitement I'd felt when Father had first brought me to board meetings. The pride I'd taken in understanding the company's operations better than anyone else in the family. Harrison met me in the lobby, a thin man in his 60s with silver hair and a carefully neutral expression. "Miss Blackwood, welcome. I trust your flight was comfortable?" "Fine, thank you." He led me through the building toward the executive conference room. The hallway was lined with portraits of Blackwood family members. My great-grandfather, my grandfather, my father. My portrait, which had once hung beside theirs, was gone. "The current management team is eager to meet with you," Harrison said as we walked. "They've prepared a presentation about the company's strategic vision and growth potential." We reached the conference room, and Harrison opened the door. "After you, Miss Blackwood." I stepped into the room, and time seemed to stop. Sitting around the mahogany table that I remembered from countless family meetings were the 3 people who had destroyed my life. Father, now in his early 70s, his hair completely gray, but his posture still commanding. Mother, elegant as always, though I could see the stress in the lines around her eyes. And Marcus, my golden boy brother, now 34 years old, and wearing the haunted expression of a man who'd watched his inheritance crumble. For a moment, nobody spoke. Father's face went white. Mother's hand flew to her throat. Marcus stared at me like he was seeing a ghost. "Hello, Father," I said quietly. "Mother, Marcus." Father was the first to recover. "Victoria," his voice was barely above a whisper. "You're the investor?" "I'm the investor." I walked to the chair at the head of the table, the chair that had once been Father's, that should have been mine. "I'm Victoria Capital Management." The silence stretched on. Harrison looked confused, clearly realizing there was history here that he didn't understand. "Perhaps we should begin the presentation," he said uncertainly. "No," I said, settling into the chair. "I think we should start with honesty. Mr. Harrison, Did they tell you who I am? Harrison looked between me and my family. I'm afraid I don't understand. I'm Victoria Blackwood, as in the Blackwood family. I'm the daughter and sister of the people you represent. Harrison's face went pale. I wasn't aware. Of course you weren't, because 6 years ago I was disowned by this family, cast out, disinherited. They made it very clear that I was no longer welcome in their lives or their business. I looked directly at Father. Isn't that right? Father's jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscles bulging. Victoria, we can discuss family matters later. Right now, we need to focus on the business. The business? I laughed, and the sound echoed in the conference room. The business that you said I could never be trusted with. The business that you said required family loyalty above all else. Things have changed, Mother said quietly. The situation is difficult. Difficult. I repeated the word like it tasted bad. Is that what we're calling it? Your golden boy has run the company into the ground, and now you're so desperate to save it that you're willing to work with the daughter you threw away? Marcus finally spoke up. Victoria, I know you're angry. Angry? I stood up, placing my hands on the table. I'm not angry, Marcus. Angry is what I was 6 years ago when you stole from the family and I got punished for reporting it. Angry is what I was when Father chose a thief over his honest daughter. Angry is what I was when I had to start over with nothing because I had the audacity to tell the truth. I walked to the window that overlooked the factory floor. What I am now is successful, wealthy, powerful. I built an empire from nothing, and I built it on the very principles that you said made me unfit for this family. We made mistakes, Father said, his voice heavy. We know that now. I turned back to face them. Do you? Do you really? Because it seems to me that you're only saying that because you need something from me. Victoria, please, Mother said. We're family. No. My voice was cold. You made it very clear 6 years ago that we're not family. You can't throw someone away and then claim kinship when it's convenient. Harrison cleared his throat. Perhaps we should schedule another meeting when everyone has had time to. No, I said. We're going to finish this now. I came here to evaluate an investment opportunity, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. I returned to my seat and opened my briefcase, pulling out a thick folder of documents. I've reviewed your financial records, and the situation is worse than you described, Mr. Harrison. The company isn't just struggling, it's dying. I spread the documents across the table, the same table where I'd once presented evidence of Marcus's theft. Your debt-to-equity ratio is 3-1. Your operating margins have been negative for 8 consecutive quarters. You've lost 40% of your workforce in the past 2 years, and your remaining employees are actively seeking other opportunities. Father's face was grim. We're aware of the challenges. Challenges? I picked up a contract termination letter. Henderson Manufacturing just canceled a $2 million order because you missed 3 delivery deadlines. That's not a challenge. That's incompetence. Marcus flinched as if I'd slapped him. The supply chain issues weren't what? Predictable? Every other manufacturing company in the region saw them coming and adapted. But not Blackwood Industries. Not under your leadership. I pulled out another document. And then there's this. You took out a $5 million loan against the company's real estate assets. The same assets that great-grandfather built, that grandfather expanded, that Father was supposed to protect. I looked directly at Marcus. Where did that money go? Operating expenses, Marcus said quickly. Payroll, utilities, suppliers. Gambling debts, I corrected. Because you never stopped, did you, Marcus? You just got better at hiding it. The room went dead silent. Harrison looked horrified. Mother started crying. Father's face turned purple with rage. You don't know what you're talking about, Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. I pulled out a private investigator's report and slid it across the table. Atlantic City, Las Vegas, online poker sites. You've lost another $800,000 in the past year alone. The only reason you're not in prison is because you've been stealing from yourself this time, instead of the company. Marcus stared at the report, his face crumbling. Father grabbed it and read quickly, his expression growing darker with each page. My God, Father whispered. Marcus, tell me this isn't true. I can explain, the same way you explained it 6 years ago. I interrupted. With tears and promises and sob stories about addiction, how did that work out for the family, Father? Did choosing the thief over the truth teller bring you the success you expected? Father looked at me with something that might have been regret. Victoria, what do you want from us? What do I want? I leaned back in my chair. I want you to understand what you threw away. I want you to see what I became without you. I want you to know that the daughter you called disloyal built something better than anything you could have imagined. I stood up and walked to the wall where the portraits hung. Do you know what I've accomplished in the 6 years since you cast me out? I've built a company worth $500 million. I've helped create thousands of jobs. I've funded breakthrough technologies that are changing the world. I've been featured on magazine covers as one of the most influential investors of my generation. I turned back to face them. And I did it all with the values you said made me unfit for this family. Honesty, integrity, merit over nepotism, hard work over connections. We're proud of you, Mother said through her tears. No, I said firmly. You don't get to be proud of me. You don't get to claim credit for what I accomplished despite you. Not because of you. Father cleared his throat. What are your terms? My terms. For the investment, for saving the company. I looked at him for a long moment. You really think I'm here to save you? Aren't you? Harrison asked. I laughed, and the sound was sharp and cold. Mr. Harrison, let me tell you what's really happening here. Blackwood Industries is going to fail, not because of market conditions or supply chain issues or any of the other excuses they've been making. It's going to fail because it's being run by people who value loyalty over competence, family over merit, tradition over innovation. I gathered my documents and put them back in my briefcase. I'm not here to save this company. I'm here to buy it. Buy it? Father's voice was hoarse. The company is worth approximately $15 million in assets, minus $15 million in debt. That makes it worth exactly nothing, but I'm prepared to offer $20 million for complete ownership, enough to pay off the debts and give the Blackwood family a small nest egg to start over. The silence was deafening. You want to buy us out completely? Marcus asked. I want to buy you out, fire you, and rebuild this company the right way, with competent leadership, ethical practices, and a vision for the future instead of nostalgia for the past. Father's face was red. This is our company, our family legacy. Your family legacy is failure, I said bluntly. Your legacy is choosing thieves over truth tellers. Your legacy is running a century-old company into the ground in less than a decade. I stood up and walked toward the door. I'll give you 24 hours to consider my offer. After that, I'll find other investment opportunities, and you can find other investors. Good luck with that. Victoria, wait, Mother called out. I paused at the door but didn't turn around. We're sorry, she said. We're truly, deeply sorry for what we did to you. I looked back at her over my shoulder. I know you are, but you're not sorry because you were wrong. You're sorry because you got caught. You're sorry because your choices had consequences. You're sorry because you need something from me. I opened the door. Real apologies come before you need forgiveness, not after. I walked out of that conference room and out of that building with my head held high. Behind me, I could hear voices, arguing, crying, the sound of a family tearing itself apart. I drove back to my hotel, packed my bags, and caught the next flight to San Francisco. I didn't wait for their answer because I already knew what it would be. They would accept my offer because they had no choice. They would sell me the company because they couldn't save it themselves. And once I owned Blackwood Industries, I would show them what real leadership looked like. The call came 3 days later. Richard Harrison's voice was defeated, hollow. Ms. Blackwood, the family has decided to accept your offer. All of it? I asked. Complete ownership transfer, immediate resignation of current management, no retained positions for family members? Yes, all of it. I felt no triumph, no satisfaction. Just the cold completion of something that had been inevitable from the moment I walked back into that conference room. I'll have the papers drawn up. The transaction should be completed within 2 weeks. But even as I was finalizing the purchase, I was already executing a plan that had been years in the making. A plan that went far beyond simply buying my family's company. You see, While I'd been building my empire in California, I'd also been quietly acquiring something else: leverage. Not just financial leverage, but personal leverage over everyone who had wronged me. I knew about Father's secret investment in a real estate development that had gone bankrupt, costing his retirement fund $3 million. I knew about Mother's prescription pill addiction that she'd been hiding from the family for years. I knew about Marcus's gambling debts to some very dangerous people in Las Vegas. But most importantly, I knew something that would destroy them all. The transaction closed on a Friday morning. I signed the papers in my lawyer's office in San Francisco, while the Blackwood family signed identical documents in Harrison's office back home. With the stroke of a pen, Blackwood Industries became mine. But I didn't fly back immediately. Instead, I spent the weekend preparing for what would be my final act of revenge. On Monday morning, I walked into the Blackwood Industries headquarters as the new owner. The employees were gathered in the main factory floor, nervous and uncertain about their future. Many of them had worked for the company for decades. Some had worked alongside my great-grandfather. "Good morning," I said, my voice carrying easily across the large space. "For those who don't know me, my name is Victoria Blackwood. As of this morning, I'm the new owner of this company." A murmur went through the crowd. Some of the older employees remembered me, remembered when I was the young woman who used to walk through these same halls, learning the business from the ground up. "I know you're concerned about your jobs, about the future of this company. I want to start by saying that every single one of you will be keeping your positions. In fact, we're going to be hiring." The relief in the room was palpable. This company was built by my great-grandfather as a place where people could work with dignity, earn fair wages, and take pride in what they created. Somewhere along the way, we lost sight of that vision. Today, we're going to get it back. I outlined my plans for the company: new equipment, updated facilities, expanded product lines, competitive benefits packages, everything that should have been done years ago, but wasn't, because the previous management was more concerned with maintaining their lifestyle than investing in the business. "We're going to become the premier manufacturing company in the region again," I continued. "Not through cost-cutting or layoffs, but through innovation, quality, and treating our employees like the valuable assets they are." The applause was thunderous. But then I held up my hand for silence, and my expression grew serious. "However, before we move forward, there's something you all need to know, something about the previous management that explains why this company nearly failed." I pressed a button on a small remote, and a large screen descended from the ceiling. The first image that appeared was a financial document, a bank statement showing Marcus's gambling losses. Over the past 6 years, the previous CEO, Marcus Blackwood, has stolen approximately $2.8 million from this company to fund his gambling addiction. Gasps echoed through the factory. These people had been laid off, had seen their benefits cut, had watched their workplace deteriorate, while Marcus was stealing from them. The next image showed Father's secret real estate investment. The previous chairman, Robert Blackwood, secretly borrowed $3 million from the company's pension fund to cover his personal investment losses, money that was supposed to secure your retirements. The mood in the room was shifting from relief to anger. And Helen Blackwood, who served on the board of directors, has been embezzling money from the company's charitable foundation, money that was supposed to go to local schools and community programs to pay for her prescription drug habit. The screen went dark, and I looked out at the faces of the employees, people who had dedicated their lives to this company only to be betrayed by the family they trusted. The reason this company nearly failed wasn't because of market conditions or foreign competition, I said. It failed because the Blackwood family treated it like their personal piggy bank. They stole from you, lied to you, and put your livelihoods at risk to cover their own mistakes. The anger in the room was building, and I could see it in their faces. These were good people who had been treated badly by people who should have protected them. But here's what they didn't know, I continued. For the past 2 years, I've been working with federal investigators to document their crimes. As we speak, FBI agents are serving arrest warrants for Robert Blackwood, Helen Blackwood, and Marcus Blackwood on charges of embezzlement, fraud, and violation of fiduciary duty. The silence was absolute. The money they stole will be recovered and used to fund your pension plans, update this facility, and ensure that this company never again falls victim to the kind of corruption that nearly destroyed it. I paused, letting that sink in. You see, 6 years ago, I tried to expose Marcus's theft, and I was punished for it. I was called disloyal, dishonest, and untrustworthy. I was cast out of my family for choosing ethics over loyalty. I looked around the room at the faces of people who had known me as a child, who had watched me grow up in these halls, but I never stopped fighting for what was right. I built my own company based on the principles that my family rejected. And when I became successful enough, when I became powerful enough, I came back to finish what I started. I walked to the center of the factory floor, the same place where my great-grandfather used to address his workers. The Blackwood family name will no longer be associated with corruption and failure. Under my leadership, it will once again stand for integrity, innovation, and respect for the people who make this company great. The applause started slowly, then built to a roar. These people had been betrayed, lied to, and stolen from, but now they were seeing justice. As I left the factory that day, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 6 years. Peace, not satisfaction, not triumph, but the deep, quiet peace that comes from knowing you've done the right thing, even when it cost you everything. My phone rang as I was driving back to my hotel. It was Harrison. Miss Blackwood. His voice was shaken. I need to inform you that Robert Helen and Marcus Blackwood have been arrested. The charges are extensive. I'm aware. The family is, they're asking if you would consider if there's any way. Any way what, Mr. Harrison? Any way you might help them. Financially. For legal fees, for bail. I pulled into the hotel parking lot and sat in my car for a moment. Tell me something, Mr. Harrison. 6 years ago, when they disowned me, did they ask if I needed help? Did they wonder how I would survive with nothing? Did they offer any assistance at all? No, ma'am. Then you have your answer. I hung up and walked into the hotel. That evening, I sat in my room and watched the local news coverage of the arrests. The story dominated every channel. The fall of one of the city's most prominent families, the corruption that had nearly destroyed a century-old company, the daughter who had returned to expose the truth. The reporters didn't have all the details, but they had enough. They talked about the disinherited daughter, who had built her own empire, the family that had cast her out, only to end up begging for her help. The poetic justice of the situation. I turned off the television and looked out the window at the city where I'd been born, where I'd grown up, where I'd been cast out and had now returned triumphant. Tomorrow, I would fly back to San Francisco. I would run Blackwood Industries remotely while building it back into the company it was meant to be. I would hire the best managers, invest in the best equipment, and treat the employees with the respect they deserved. The Blackwood name would survive, but it would survive on my terms, representing my values, building the kind of legacy I could be proud of. As for my family, they would face the consequences of their choices. Father would spend his remaining years in prison, his reputation destroyed, his fortune gone. Mother would face her addiction in a rehabilitation facility if she was lucky enough to avoid prison herself. Marcus would learn what it meant to lose everything, to start over with nothing, to face the world without the family name to protect him. I felt no joy in their downfall, but I felt no sadness either. They had made their choices, and choices have consequences. I was Victoria Blackwood, and I had finally come home. But as I prepared for sleep that night, something nagged at me. A detail that didn't quite fit. A piece of the puzzle that seemed out of place. Harrison had called me 3 days after my meeting with the family. 3 days to consider an offer that they couldn't afford to refuse. But the FBI arrests had been planned for weeks, coordinated with prosecutors and investigators. The timing was too perfect, too convenient. Unless, I sat up in bed, my mind racing. The due diligence documents Harrison had sent me, the financial records that showed every detail of the company's situation, the access to information that should have been confidential. Harrison had known who I was from the beginning. He'd known I was Victoria Blackwood, the disowned daughter. He'd known about my success, my wealth, my reputation. He'd orchestrated the entire meeting, knowing exactly how I would react, knowing exactly what I would do. But why? Why would the Blackwood family's lawyer help me destroy them? I opened my laptop and started researching. Within an hour, I had my answer. Richard Harrison wasn't just the Blackwood family's lawyer. He was also the executor of my great-grandfather's estate. The estate that included a provision I'd never known about. A provision that said if the Blackwood family ever lost control of the company through criminal activity, ownership would revert to the most ethical member of the bloodline. Harrison had been waiting for this moment for years. He'd watched the family's corruption, documented their crimes, and waited for the right opportunity to fulfill my great-grandfather's final wishes. I was never just buying the company. I was inheriting it, exactly as my great-grandfather had intended. The old man had known. Somehow, he'd known that the family would eventually destroy itself, and he'd planned for it. He'd built a safeguard into his will that would ensure the company survived, even if the family didn't. I laughed out loud in the empty hotel room. Even from the grave, my great-grandfather had been smarter than all of us. But then I realized something else, something that made my blood run cold. If Harrison had been planning this for years, if he'd been documenting the family's crimes and waiting for the right moment to expose them, then he knew everything. He knew about Father's real estate investments, about Mother's prescription addiction, about Marcus's gambling debts. He knew about all of it, and he'd done nothing to stop it. He'd let the family destroy themselves, let them steal from their employees, let them run the company into the ground, all so that I would inherit it exactly as my great-grandfather had planned. The employees who had been laid off, the pension funds that had been raided, the community programs that had been defunded, all of that suffering could have been prevented if Harrison had acted sooner. But he hadn't acted, because the plan required the family to fall completely. It required them to commit crimes serious enough to trigger the inheritance clause. It required their complete and utter destruction. I was the beneficiary of a conspiracy that had been decades in the making. A conspiracy that had destroyed my family, hurt innocent people, and nearly ruined a century-old company, all to ensure that I would inherit what was rightfully mine. The victory I thought I'd earned through my own efforts was actually the result of a plan I'd never been part of, orchestrated by a man I barely knew, designed to fulfill the wishes of a dead man I'd never really understood. I closed my laptop and lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. Everything I thought I knew about my story was wrong. I wasn't the wrong daughter who had built her own empire and returned to claim justice. I was a pawn in someone else's game, a beneficiary of someone else's revenge. But did it matter? The result was the same. The company was mine, the employees were protected, and justice had been served. Did it matter that the justice had been orchestrated rather than earned? I thought about my great-grandfather, the man who had built Blackwood Industries from nothing, the man whose portrait still hung in the company hallway, whose values had supposedly guided the family for generations. Had he really foreseen this moment, or had Harrison simply used his memory to justify his own actions? I would never know for certain. But as I finally drifted off to sleep, one thought kept repeating in my mind. Sometimes the most perfect revenge is the one you never see coming. And sometimes the person getting revenge isn't who you think it is. 6 months later, I was back in the Blackwood Industries headquarters, but this time as the permanent CEO. The company was thriving under my leadership. We'd landed 3 major contracts, hired back most of the laid-off employees, and restored the pension fund to full funding. I was working late in my office, reviewing plans for a new facility expansion, when Harrison knocked on my door. "Miss Blackwood, do you have a moment?" I looked up at him, this man who had orchestrated the destruction of my family and handed me everything I'd thought I'd earned through my own efforts. "Of course, Mr. Harrison. Please, sit down." He settled into the chair across from my desk, looking older than I remembered. The stress of the past months had taken its toll on him. "I wanted to talk to you about something," he said. "Something I should have told you months ago." "About my great-grandfather's will?" He looked surprised. "You know?" I figured it out. The inheritance clause, the requirement that the family lose control through criminal activity, the provision that ownership would revert to the most ethical member of the bloodline. I leaned back in my chair. You've been planning this for years, haven't you? Harrison nodded slowly. Your great-grandfather was a remarkable man. He built this company on principles that he knew his descendants might not share. So he built in a safeguard that required my family to destroy themselves. He hoped it would never be necessary, but he was a realist. He'd seen too many family businesses destroyed by the second and third generations, who took their inheritance for granted. I looked out the window at the factory floor, where workers were preparing for the evening shift change. How long have you known about their crimes? Years. I documented everything, hoping that someone in the family would step up and put a stop to it. When you exposed Marcus's gambling the first time, I thought you might be that person. But then they cast me out. And I realized that your great-grandfather's fears were well-founded. The family had chosen corruption over integrity, just as he'd predicted they might. I turned back to face him. So you let them continue. You let them steal from their employees. Let them run the company into the ground. Let them hurt innocent people, all so that your plan would work. Harrison's face was pained. I know how it looks. But I was bound by legal obligations. I couldn't act against my clients without cause, and I couldn't reveal the inheritance clause without triggering it prematurely. You could have found a way. You could have protected those employees, saved the pension fund, prevented the suffering. Perhaps. But then the company would have remained in their hands, and the cycle would have continued. The next generation would have made the same mistakes, caused the same harm. I stood up and walked to the portrait of my great-grandfather that hung on the wall behind my desk. What would he think of all this? Of what his safeguard cost? He would think that the price was worth paying to ensure the company's survival. He cared more about the institution than about any individual, including his own family. I stared at the portrait for a long moment. The man who had built this empire, who had foreseen its potential destruction, who had orchestrated its salvation from beyond the grave. Was he a visionary or a manipulator, a protector or a destroyer? There's something else, Harrison said quietly. I turned back to him. What? The inheritance clause. It doesn't just apply to the company. My heart stopped. What do you mean? Harrison pulled out a thick folder and placed it on my desk. Your great-grandfather's personal fortune was subject to the same conditions. The family trusts, the real estate holdings, the investment portfolios, all of it reverts to you. I opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside were documents showing assets worth over $50 million, money and property that I'd never known existed, that had been held in trust for decades, waiting for this moment. The family never knew, Harrison continued. They thought they'd inherited everything when your grandfather died, but the bulk of your great-grandfather's wealth was always meant for whoever proved themselves worthy of it. I sank back into my chair, overwhelmed. How much? Including the company, the total inheritance is approximately $75 million. $75 million. More money than I'd made in my entire career, more wealth than I could have imagined. All of it sitting in trust funds and investment accounts, waiting for me to claim it. Why are you telling me this now? Because the legal process is complete. Your family's criminal convictions have triggered all the inheritance clauses. Everything is yours now, legally and officially. I looked at the documents spread across my desk. Bank statements, property deeds, investment portfolios, a fortune built by my great-grandfather and preserved for the family member who would prove themselves worthy of it. But I felt no joy, no triumph, only a deep, unsettling realization about the true nature of what had happened. I was never the wrong daughter who built her own empire, I said quietly. I was the chosen heir, guided and protected by forces I never understood. You were both, Harrison replied. Your great-grandfather chose you, yes, but you proved yourself worthy of that choice through your own actions, your own achievements. Did I? Or was I just playing a role that was written for me before I was born? Harrison gathered the documents and stood up. Does it matter? The result is the same. You've saved the company, protected the employees, and ensured that the Blackwood legacy continues with honor. After he left, I sat alone in my office, surrounded by the weight of revelation. Everything I thought I knew about my story was both true and false. I had been wronged by my family, cast out unjustly, forced to build my own success from nothing. But I had also been chosen, guided, and ultimately rewarded by a plan that had been set in motion before I was born. I was both the victim and the beneficiary, the wronged daughter and the chosen heir, the self-made woman and the inheritor of a legacy I'd never known existed. The phone on my desk rang, interrupting my thoughts. I answered without looking at the caller ID. Victoria Blackwood. Miss Blackwood, this is Detective Sarah Martinez with the FBI's White Collar Crime Division. I'm calling about the Blackwood family case. Yes? I wanted to inform you that Marcus Blackwood was found dead in his cell this morning. Apparent suicide. The words hit me like a physical blow. What? He left a note. It was addressed to you. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of everything that had happened, everything that had led to this moment. What did it say? I'll read it to you. Victoria, you won. You got everything you wanted, and we lost everything we had. I hope it was worth it. I hope destroying your own family was worth the money and the revenge. You're not the sister I remember. You're not even human anymore. You're just like him, like great-grandfather. Cold, calculating, willing to sacrifice anyone to get what you want. Congratulations. You're the perfect Blackwood after all. I hung up the phone and sat in the silence of my office. Marcus was dead. My brother, for all his flaws and crimes, was gone. The golden boy who had stolen from the family, who had been chosen over me, who had destroyed everything he touched, he was gone. And his final words accused me of being exactly what I'd always claimed to oppose. Cold. Calculating. Willing to sacrifice family for principles. Was he right? Had I become the very thing I'd criticized my family for being? Had my quest for justice turned me into something monstrous? I looked around my office. The office that had once belonged to my father, in the building that had once belonged to my family, running the company that was now entirely mine. I had everything I'd ever wanted, and it had cost me everything I'd ever loved. I was the most successful Blackwood in 3 generations, and I was completely alone. As the sun set over the industrial district, painting the sky in shades of red and gold, I made a decision. I opened my laptop and began typing an email to my assistant. Please schedule a press conference for tomorrow morning. I have an announcement to make about the future of Blackwood Industries. Because Marcus was wrong about one thing. I wasn't like my great-grandfather. I wouldn't orchestrate other people's lives from beyond the grave. I wouldn't sacrifice innocent people for the greater good. I wouldn't let the cycle continue. Tomorrow, I would announce that Blackwood Industries was being converted to an employee-owned cooperative. The workers who had built the company, who had suffered under my family's corruption, who had remained loyal despite everything. They would own their workplace, control their destiny, and share in their success. The inheritance money would go into a foundation dedicated to supporting ethical business practices and helping other companies transition to employee ownership. And I would walk away. Again, because sometimes the greatest victory is knowing when to stop fighting. Sometimes the most perfect revenge is choosing not to take it. And sometimes the only way to win is to refuse to play the game. I was Victoria Blackwood, the last of my line, and I was finally free. But as I sat there in the growing darkness, one final thought whispered through my mind, chilling me to the bone. What if this was exactly what my great-grandfather had planned all along? What if even my final act of redemption was just another move in his century-long game? What if I was still dancing to the tune of a dead man's revenge, and I would never truly escape the web he'd woven around his family? The thought followed me home that night, and it follows me still. Because the most terrifying truth about revenge is this. You never know when it's really over. You never know who's really in control. And you never know if the person you think you've become is who you really are, or just who someone else wanted you to be. Sleep well tonight. And remember, family secrets run deeper than you think.